jiu-jitsu?
No. Amateur martial arts.
Amateur martial arts?
Amateur.
How does my hair look, darling? Reaching out to the trisexuals amongst us.
We're going to be standing.
I stand here, man, because I keep my beer here, right?
No worries.
Yeah, good to go, you know.
Alright.
Content over everything.
So I guess
God bless COE. Subscribe.
it depends. It's a big topic, doesn't really take long.
Yep.
So the question is, you say you're a race realist?
Correct.
So can you explain to me what's real about racism? What's real about your racism?
I didn't say racism, I said race realism.
Yeah, I know, but I said what's real about your racism?
But I don't think race realism is, they're different words.
Yeah, unfortunately, the scientific community has accepted that race realism is nothing but racist rhetoric.
Okay.
So the question is, where do you get your factual information that has disproved all of the information used to disprove the foundation of the information that I know you're getting from?
Okay, so there's three arguments against race is real. The first argument is the argument you're using, which is what the experts think of.
Right.
If you're a scientist and you believe in the scientific method, you shouldn't care about opinions of others, but let's take a look. So there's three arguments against
What's
race
an
realism.
opinion?
No, let me have a
What's
quick
an opinion, though? What are you stating as an opinion?
Okay, so let me just bear with me a few seconds while I...
That's not a problem. I just want to know, in particular,
So
I haven't said anything about race, haven't certified any information about race, but you've already put this narrative on me. So the question is, what opinion, right? What opinion, supposedly that I said that isn't factual?
No, I'm trying to what I'm trying to do is kind of frame what you're saying, right?
Well, frame it correctly then.
Yeah, okay. So the arguments against race realism form three particular classes of counter-arguments. Argument number one against race realism is the argument of the expert consensus. Argument number two is heterozygosity. Argument number three is clusterness.
Okay, so
you
you've
come
got
here,
one out of two. You've got one out of three.
You've started one by saying, okay, the expert consensus opinion. So we look at longitudinal studies about race, and we look at them across race and culture.
Brilliant.
How do we know what the opinions of the experts are? The first thing you do is you do the first biggest study done by Malin in 2004, is to take all the uses of the words race in the biology textbooks. So we brought the data for the race of the uses of word race in biology. If you look at the biological use of the word, it started and maintained a steady state. It dipped in the 60s, 70s, and 90s, and it rose again. If you then survey the metadata study analysis above from biology, which is physical anthropology and then cultural anthropology, you see the same pattern. If you then split culture, because liberal ideas are Western idea, and you look at the growing scientists of China and in the Soviet Union, none of them dispute that race is real. So if your argument proposition is on the first axis of a counter argument that race is not real because the experts say there's a consensus, I'm giving the evidence there is no such consensus.
Well, that's the thing. You haven't given any evidence at all because there are no studies and there are no, in particular, censuses from the Soviet Union, from the Chinese, that actually say that race is a thing. So quantify to me the difference between the races. Since you've read the studies, quantify the difference.
No problem at all. So to define race scientifically as opposed to socioculturally, how do we define race scientifically? It can be done repeatedly quite easily. A human being has 20,000 genes. Each gene is made up of a single nuclear prototype, which is called a SNP. If I take the following people over here, and I take a blind version of their genes, and I get the computer to sort them blindly, then ask everyone to self-identify their race. If I take just 2 buckets, are you pink or blue? I get a fuzzy set. If I take 3 buckets, 4 buckets, by the time I get to 5 or 7 buckets, there's a 99.9% correlation between what the computer says your race is and what you say your race is. So race is real, race can be proven by a computer, and it self-identifies with what you use as the word race.
Okay, so let's not conflate phenology. Let's not conflate it, right?
I didn't mention phenology.
How genetics work and how they identify these certain traits is because these certain traits, you just said it in a very conflated way.
Just genes.
Just genes.
Not traits, just genes.
Just genes.
Just genes.
How do you get these genes?
So if I took a sample of your saliva...
No. Not the physical method of extracting. I asked you, how did these genes come about?
You mean how did a gene get there?
Yeah, how did a gene come about?
Evolutionary biology.
Evolutionary biology. That's it.
Yeah, evolution.
There's no explanation, any deeper consensus, yeah?
So the longer explanation is, if you look at the universe, it's 15 billion years old, 4.9 billion years the Earth crystallized, 750 million years ago we had the Cambrian explosion, where most species died away. 6.2 million years ago, we split from chimps. 500,000 years ago, we had racial divergence, and that entire story
How many
is
years
evident.
ago we split from chimps?
6.2 million years, and from the common ancestor. And about 500,000 years ago, we have the racial divergence that shows up in the genetic cluster and shows up in mitochondrial DNA. So no talks about traits of humans, just the genes, blindly sorted by a computer, says he and I are not genetically the same.
So again, this is the problem. This is the problem.
Okay, what's the problem?
This is the biggest problem.
Yep.
Do you want me to answer, or do you want me to just accept his point of view?
Absolutely.
You're very free to come and join in.
I want to know the answer.
Then keep it up. So when we talk about genetics, right?
Yeah.
We know that the richest bank of genetics, right, are found within people within Africa. Now, the difference between certain people is that as the races go out into different parts of the planet,
Yep.
right, certain genes become a lot less frequent because they're not needed anymore.
Correct.
The selection and the stimuli is not there for those genes to develop, so they become redundant.
Or they call zombie genes or whatever.
This is how we figure out why certain people are how certain people are from X, Y, and Z, meaning that we all come from one strand, right? And then the worst thing is that you say it in a way that this genetics, right? This genetics and the results that they produce later on in life is fixed. We know that this is not the case because we have certain instances where we have couples in particular, and this is just a scientific experience. We have couples giving birth to different races of babies, meaning that these genetics are still dormant inside certain individuals, but they need the right stimuli to be active. So even your explanation of the fact that we have all different genetics, right? Completely false.
Not at all.
So let's not conflate. Conflate genetics. Let's not conflate biology, and let's not explain it wrong to the viewers.
Okay, so
let's explain it in its entirety, and don't be selective, because we're going to bring up history as well, and I'm going to show you how selective you are in history as well. So carry on.
Okay. So let me just redress your points right there. So you're correct, and we have a genetic history. We're correct that the genetic history has been involved. You're correct in saying certain genes are activated, not activated.
You don't need to tell me that. We're going.
They're coding or non-encoding genes. And we have a history of genetic progress through the planet, the out of Africa theory, etc., etc.
No, fair,
So what you're trying to say is somehow because these genes are either not being protein coded, not coding for proteins, or not being activated, it's not an argument that these genes are not equal. So my genes are not your genes. So if I took your genes, the three of us would cluster at about 85% away into three different buckets by a computer blindly. If I said I was brown, you said you're black, you said you're white, the computer would say the same thing.
No, but this is the difference.
Right?
When you conflate, what I'm trying to say is, you're saying that you want to join in. Do you want to join in, right? Do you want to join in? Do you want to join in? Please join in and add fact to it.
Yeah, go on.
Don't add just
sound
bites,
I'm listening.
yeah?
I'm listening.
Brilliant, brilliant.
It's not sound bites.
Again,
I'm listening to what you're saying.
Difference in genetics, right? And the reason we have dormant genetics, right? To show that we are from one strand. You will never be able to get a horse with wings because that genetics, the genetics within them don't exist.
Correct.
So what I'm trying to say is if you manipulate certain stimuli, certain factors, certain environmental conditions, you can turn a white person into a black person. You can turn an Asian person into a black person. You can turn a black person into an Oriental person.
But even without that.
So the question is, what I'm trying to think is show me an exact example where we cannot do that, or we cannot produce certain traits or certain genetics, as you say, that we see in X, Y, and Z human beings in another human being.
So there's two arguments there, one you have. Let me unpack them. The first one you're saying is there genetic variation? Is it functional or not? Yes, there's genetic variation. Some things are not functionally coding. The second argument you're saying is, can I, in the future, in a science fiction sense, genetically experiment people so we all look green with blue eyes?
It's not even science fiction.
No, but that's
we
a
can
future
do it now.
statement. No,
we can do it now.
Well, I don't see the genetic
We can do it now.
Why would we want to?
So
Well, that's a separate question. But why would we want to separate? His
Try keep up.
argument.
Try keep up.
I'm with you, but why would we want to? You're
We're not
talking
actually
about
debating.
mixing genes, but why?
Try to keep up. We're not trying to
with
debate.
you, but why would we want to mix them?
The point was, we're not trying to make different human beings, right? So put that out of the picture. I don't know where you got that from.
You're the one that
The point
mentioned
is, the point is,
You're
is
the
that
one talking about
human beings are from
black
one
person
strand.
become white. Why would a black person
Wait,
become white?
Try to listen.
Yeah,
Try
no,
to
I
listen, right? Try to listen. Human beings are from one strand, meaning that you can produce any genetics that you see in other human beings in other human
Yeah,
beings.
but we haven't.
If you actually apply the same stimuli,
But right now we haven't.
you can do that.
Yeah, okay, but right now we haven't, right? You and I
we
are
haven't?
genetically different.
So there you go.
If you and I sent out a blind saliva test,
Yeah.
we would vary by 0.03% in our genetic
I didn't
code.
realize that we were both raised in an establishment that provided the same stimuli and tried to genetically.
But
That's
that-
not what I said.
but okay.
So don't confuse that.
Okay, but,
don't
the,
confuse
but the
that.
genes don't care about the environment.
What did I say, Ralph?
Yeah, but the genes don't care
Listen,
about
listen.
the
What
environment.
did I say?
AI
Listen to my
doesn't
words.
care.
Yeah, I
Listen
heard
to my
your
words.
words. I have very good
My
comprehensive
words
skills.
are if we manipulate environmental factors,
Yeah.
stimuli,
Yeah.
we can make certain humans have very similar features.
Correct.
It won't be complete
But I'm not disagreeing
because
with
that's
that.
a scientific.
But I'm not
That's a
disagreeing
sci-fi.
with
You are.
No, I'm
No,
saying
he's
that.
not.
completely
He says
different.
he's
No,
not,
I'm
so
not
it's
saying
not.
you
Wait,
can't.
let me
No,
finish.
no.
Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish.
Yeah, take your time.
So that was what I said. Now you're saying that, but me and you were completely different.
We are.
Now I asked you again, where was the circumstance or the scenario in which we were exposed to the same stimuli for that to have
But
happened?
the answer is that we
But-
weren't.
Say that again?
We had what is called technically evolutionary divergence.
So this is the problem.
So we've evolved
When I said
differently.
when I said to you it was a facilitated situation, and then you brought me and you as an example.
Just as a living example.
Two evolutionary naturally brought about.
Different evolution.
They're completely two different.
No, but my
two
point
different
is,
modules.
so
Two
let's
different
make it
modules.
simple for the audience.
So let's not get confused. Let's not get confused.
I'm not confused at all.
Ralph, you're very
You're trying
confused.
to
So
control
let's not
the
get confused.
conversation. The
So-
whole conversation about you trying to
Okay,
control it.
okay. That's
You are.
really good.
Let's
That's really
keep all the
cute. That's
personal
really
stuff
cute.
out of it.
That's
Let's
really
keep
cute.
all
That's
the
really
personal axes
Now,
out.
yeah. So I'm not here to have an argument with you. I don't really care. I want to do this as quick as possible.
Discussion.
But the question is, when I said it, it was facilitated. Now you just brought up me and you. We're natural examples. That's it. Natural.
Yeah,
you
but-
can't
no, but
compare
I
natural
believe in the
examples.
state of nature. If I took the 7 billion...
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. If you
7
believe in the state
billion-
of nature,
I
that's
believe in the
brilliant.
state of nature, and the 7 billion chimps on this planet each have a 20,000 digit long digit pin code. Your pin code is not his pin code or my pin code. That pin code, you're correct, did not just show up yesterday. It comes from a long chain of evolution going back 6 million years where we split from chimps, and his 20,000 pin code, my 20,000 pin code, your 20,000 are different. So race realism at its foundation says we must accept that the biological
right or wrong?
difference.
Is that
Would you
right or
agree with
wrong?
that?
So again, we
you
must
agree
accept the biological differences.
That we are different biologically.
Show me the biological differences.
you're not
If I
listening,
took
are
your
you?
saliva
No.
and your 20,000 digit pin
Yeah.
code would not be like mine.
No, differences is very different to
No, it's
variation.
a question.
Variation
Yeah,
are
ask it.
things that you can manipulate to achieve the same reflecting results.
Okay.
Differences are something that you cannot achieve in the other partner or the counteracting partner. So show me the differences that you cannot achieve genetically within the races.
No, you can achieve. If I took him and I had sufficiently advanced technology and I performed gene cell therapy on him and replaced him with my genes, he would be like me, and the only variation would be our environmental experience.
But this is what exactly.
But we don't have the same genes.
But this is exactly
We're
what
not
I'm trying-
genetically the same.
But this is
right?
exactly what I'm trying to say. This is because we grew up in different environments.
Correct.
And you know this, right?
Correct, yes,
So
of
I don't
course.
even know why we're batting back and forth.
But I don't
So
understand the
question
point you're
is-
trying to make. Let me
point
try
I tried to make is
so let me,
clear.
let me
And
try
is there a
No,
difference
no.
between people that are brought up in certain environments between people that are brought up in other environments?
There are variations.
There's a massive difference.
Correct.
variation.
And
People that
every
are brought up in
difference.
England and people that are born
Correct.
in
And
South
every
Africa.
and
What
every
difference?
difference can
The
be.
difference is that we can give ourselves war. We can go to attack. We can run a.
Well, that's a different. That's a civilization.
I know it's cheap. I know it's cheap.
No, but civilization. But let me try it
But
this way.
that's what it is, though.
But
I mean,
don't want to take him
Can I
away.
quickly?
What was your last? What was the last
Give-
bit you said I didn't
bro.
know? Sorry to interrupt.
No.
no,
Can
no,
I
no,
want to
quickly-
get too- we
no,
don't want to
sorry,
get
can I
too off
quickly-
topic,
quickly,
because
Just
I
because I
think-
don't want it to
You're
get
not
derailed or
interrupting
whatever.
us.
Yeah,
No, I get
but I meant to have
So
one-on-one.
you said that
You're
one
not
of the differences. I'll come back to you, Ralph. All right.
Sorry.
You said one of the differences is that you can go to the tap, you can give yourself water, etc. Blah blah blah. That's very different to different cultures, right? Different cultures may not need that because
So
they
no.
have a normal, healthy source, right, of drinkable water.
Why?
So they
'Cause
don't
we
need
made it.
taps, right? In Europe, right, Europe in particular, they didn't have a sewer system until the 17th or the 18th century, but there were sewer systems. Say that again?
You said sewer system, right?
Yeah, sewer system.
What about Rome?
Are we talking about Greater Europe?
What?
Are we talking
You
about
said it didn't
Western
happen-
Europe?
You said it didn't happen until the 17th century.
We didn't happen to the 17th century.
Right, what about Rome?
We're talking about when we say the West. Normally, they often say the UK, America. Greeks are never really. If you want to compare, if you want to add the Greeks in, that's very fine, right? That's very fine. We
This
can do
is
the Greeks.
really wandering
we
a
can
lot
do the
off
Greeks.
topic,
But
off
what I'm trying to
beast,
say is, in
right?
particular, there are certain places now that haven't developed
Yeah.
that had
Absolutely, yeah.
technologies and innovations that
That's
certain places didn't have.
Yeah.
So when you say differences, right? I say variations.
Variation
Very
is a better term.
different.
So let's look at variation.
It's a better term.
So we have a genetic. So let's make a simple example for the audience. Everyone has a unique 20,000 digit pin code. Your pin code is not the same as mine.
Absolutely.
So you're now sliding into the second argument against race realism, which is actually mixed up between two of the second arguments and third arguments.
Which is actually proved the first. I just quickly
Give me some time.
no,
Okay, so I give you some time.
Go ahead, go, bro.
Yeah. So the two second arguments against race realism, there are only three. It's called heterozygosity or costedness. Heterozygosity is the argument in English that says more variation than between than across. There's more variation in a human being than between other species. We do this scientifically by what's called FST distance. I take the alleles in my genes and say how close is a collie from an Alsatian? How close is an Alsatian from a lapdog? How close is a black wolf from a grey wolf? How close is an African to an Aborigine versus an African to a Norman person? And you can see this argument is saying that genetic variation, somehow because it has the difference between variation between and variation within, is not backed up in the scientific data. That's why I can send out my DNA test on the saliva to 23andMe, and the test will come back saying he's white, he's mixed, I'm mixed, you're black, he's black. So the argument that you're calling, which is technically called heterozygosity, the argument of heterozygosity saying there's more variation within than between, is across all species.
Okay, so
two wolves can look like each other wolves, we can look like humans, but within the wolf population, within the human population, we are not the same.
But the thing is, wolves don't
Would
call
you accept
themselves
that or
different
not?
races.
But would you accept that?
or not?
Yeah, I accept that.
Okay, brilliant.
But
So we
wolves
can
do not
accept-
wolves do not call themselves different races.
there's
They
diff-
still
there
acknowledge
are
that they are
differences
part of a
between-
The
wolf pack.
scientific literature on that is quite clear. You look at the taxonomy classification, what is
You
a
want to,
species?
you want to deny science?
Say that again?
He's not trying to
You
deny
wanna
science. I
deny
think he's
No, I'm
accepting
trying to
slowly.
explain science.
So if you look at it,
You have to understand it.
Yeah, no,
so what is
okay,
the difference between a
That's-
species
That's
and
like
race?
one of the first
It
tasks.
sounds like you're trying to deny.
Okay, but let's
No,
not get
no,
into
there
this.
is a difference between a white
Sorry.
man and
Yeah, so let's stay on topic, mate. Let's just say. So what is the difference
Find out
between
those
this?
differences if you can prove them.
Okay, so what is the difference in classification? So if I classicate, these two people share ethnicities, they're different ethnicities and in the same race. We don't share ethnicity or race with them, and the thing above us all is called the human species. What is the biological definition of species versus race? It's quite simple. Can they have viable offspring? If I fucked a donkey, the donkey would not be able to conceive a child.
I don't know
If
why
I
you're
fucked a
giving
white
everyone a
girl,
simple
she could create a
biology
child.
lesson.
Because science is at the foundation of everything I do. So in that
Not really.
biological taxonomy,
Sure.
if I create species at the top as defined by viable offspring, we are different races, 7 buckets mop up the whole planet, and there's different ethnicities. So ethnicities versus race versus species is a biological concept rooted in your DNA. And that can be evidenced by giving you all a 20,000 digit pin code. His pin code is not like mine, his is close to Leon and you. Your pin codes are very similar, and mine is not like
The
yours.
thing I don't agree is you were saying about the variation within a particular
And
race
between.
is greater than between, and you said because you can do DNA testing.
What's called
and
FST
see-
distance.
Yeah.
So,
Well, here's
That's
the
actually
thing.
not
You're
even-
only
it's not even
looking
true,
at
but go on.
certain,
Absolutely, sir.
certain parts of the
Absolutely.
DNA.
There you go, sir.
For instance, you have DNA to to make your skin black,
Absolutely,
brown,
absolutely,
white.
sorry.
So you can look at that.
But this is
and
the problem.
say,
So the human
we're-
genome
we're-
sequence-
we're completely different.
Yeah.
but we
in
look
that.
different, don't we?
Yeah, no, but then you
That's not because of
couldn't say,
capabilities.
but that wouldn't mean that he
Absolutely.
can play basketball and I can't.
But that's a
That'd be
different
that'd
argument.
be a
Absolutely.
No, but that's a
Yes,
separate
sir,
argument. That's
absolutely.
an
No, but the thing is, you're simplifying. You're simplifying science.
No,
You
I'm
are
not-
simplifying
I'm making
science.
no inferences.
And the thing is, we are trying our hardest to make the explanation of this science so that it actually fits the facts,
but what are you
not
trying your hardest
the
against?
narrative.
What are you
not
trying
the
your hardest
narrative.
against?
Say that again.
By the way, you said you're trying your hardest. What
We're trying
against?
our hardest to explain.
what?
Who said against?
No, because
Right,
if
and
you
who
try
said
your
against?
hardest, if you're trying your hardest, you've got to try your hardest against something.
No.
The
When you're
idea
trying your
or-
hardest, you can add to something.
And you know.
You can add to something.
So let's
Try
address
to
the
listen.
gentleman.
Try to listen.
So let's
right?
address the
What?
gentleman's
What
point
was
first.
that?
The gentleman's point first
What?
is different. So 99.97%
It's not different, by the way. It's really not
is what
different.
we share in common.
if you want.
No, but that's what the Human Genome Project tells me it does. So of that 99.97% that we are similar, if you're
Not
equal,
about
like
trying
we
to play
both.
God.
No, let's take a simple example. If we have 2 legs and 2 hands, we're similar. We both have a head, we're similar. We all have 2 ears, mine are better than yours. Yeah, but so they're similar. That doesn't allow me to explain difference. Difference must focus on the bit that is not the same.
Yes,
So if I say 99.9% the same, it's an argument.
And you haven't actually materialized
I- I-
It's a qualitative
You
argument
said it.
based on heterozygosity. It's a difference, and how do you measure difference scientifically? In molecular biology, that's called the FST distance.
But
I
this
look
is
at the
the
alleles
biggest
and genes are
problem.
not similar.
This is.
I'm not
sir,
sure what
the
you're
biggest problem is
arguing,
what?
because I've come in a bit late.
Yep.
But generally speaking, within races, there's a whole range of talents.
There you go.
Anything
There
that
you
you want
go.
to measure,
There you go.
like height,
Exactly.
running ability, IQ, any single
All the good
thing.
things, yeah, are
But,
different.
no,
They're not different.
No,
They're totally
No, no,
different.
no.
They're
Within,
totally
say,
different.
You don't look like me, I don't look like you.
No. But
And that's because of
just one
environmental
thing.
factors,
But
for
if,
sure.
if we had a
Sure.
race,
Yeah.
and we got 100 black people, 100 white, 100 brown
Yeah.
people, the black people wouldn't all wouldn't
Win.
be,
Higher
it wouldn't-
muscle twitch
There you go,
ratio.
there you go.
High-
it would all be
Correct.
mixed.
No. If we ran 100 black people today, and 100 white people, and 100 brown people, 100 meters,
Sir,
guess who's going to
sir,
be first to 9
sir,
positions?
sir,
Not
do you
brownie
mind-
or white.
Do you mind if I just quickly,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
because,
sure,
in the
because
1930s,
I don't
Berlin
mean to turn
Games.
this into a patronising science lesson because people should know this already. We've
Yeah,
all
yeah.
been through this, and the fact that I have to explain the fact that there's a difference between difference and a difference between variation is rather embarrassing, right?
But you're
So
not-
the whole
No, you
point is,
said that-
the whole
No,
point
one
is-
at a time, no.
Okay,
That's a
I'll let you
character.
finish. I'll let you finish.
After you.
I'll let you
Yeah,
finish.
let him go.
Right. So I asked you again, what is the difference? You haven't given me a physical difference. You haven't given me a phenotypical difference, right? That can't be manipulated and used to produce offspring that look very similar to X, Y, and Z, right? You haven't done that.
Okay.
You then went to genetics, right? And said that there's a difference between the genetic, relation between certain species. Certain people are further than others, right? But that doesn't take into account the mutations that other people would have experienced as they differentiated from different groups. So that would have made them completely different to the core group. The same way we would have gone off from the chimps, isolated ourselves, and made completely different species from the chimps, and that's why we can't reproduce. So please do not butcher the scientific literature and try to use it to fit your narrative. Let's be honest about it. So give me a physical difference. Give me a physical difference, right? Not even a physical difference. Give me some kind of
Blatant
difference
difference.
that you cannot see
Blatant.
in certain races across the world.
Really?
So let me-
Because
Let me
right
answer this question, mate,
now
because-
we're just babbling science, and
No,
this
no.
is science that
No,
people
no,
know.
no, no,
So
but
let's
you
have the
finish what
debate.
you're
Go
saying.
ahead, go ahead.
Babbling.
So now that you've used and you've decided to use personal characteristics,
What
which
personal
I haven't,
characteristics?
babbling, bullshitting. Let me tell you, I can
I
tell.
didn't say bullshit, but babbling is an observation.
Let
Go
me
on.
can tell you, I can tell you right now that you do not have any training in molecular genetics. I can tell you that from the words you use.
Is that why?
Let me help understand for the people to understand. It's very, very much simpler than that. We have a 20,000 long digit code that arrived for 7 million of mutations. I am not saying a particular gene, a particular allele cannot be switched to create a difference. You're arguing just because there's a gene that evolved this way is not the same as saying by modus ponens that such a gene cannot be put into someone else.
No,
I'm
that's not
saying,
what I said.
Can you hear me out?
That's not what I said, but go on.
Okay, so hear me out. So
You need to listen. You need to listen.
So if you keep doing the kind of
No,
personal
that's not,
ad-hom
no,
stuff,
it's not.
that's
It's not
gonna
about
get
ad
very
homs.
dull,
It's
right?
about when we have a debate.
I'm not
You listen
finished.
to my
I'm
actual
not
point. No,
finished.
that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
So let me finish. I haven't actually finished. You've actually just
Fair enough,
interjected
fair enough,
again.
fair enough.
So let me go once go. The scientific literature is crystal clear. We will follow up on Leon's channel,
You
and
might have
I
to
will
read
give you
up on it.
150
Go on.
studies
you
searching
can.
every point I did.
And I'll give you.
So what we're saying here
Can't
is
be
quite
studies.
simple in race realism. We're saying everyone has a 20,000 digit pin code. My pin code is not like your pin code. 99.97% of those are same. Because they're the same, we have 2 legs and 2 hands and everyone has a head. Because those bits are the same, they're not interesting. What's interesting is the difference. When we look at the difference between genetic code, it's why you have different hair from me, why I have different color. Those things then surface upwards into phenotypical traits that express themselves in an environment, that
just
create
going
a
around the
culture,
circle.
that create a culture
We are
that
just going around.
No,
go
you don't want
onwards.
to listen. That's the thing.
It's because I've heard it
someone
twice.
listens,
I've heard it
when
twice.
someone listens to someone,
Right, and I'm really not
I
up
substitute
for
Africans
like the
for
drunk
fastest
kind of
runners.
like thing today.
Exactly. And then
Let me have a discussion.
I'm
Let me
like,
have a
when someone
discussion. Right
talks,
then.
you
Right
usually
then.
look at them,
Right
you
then.
don't start
Right
putting
then.
your head
Right
in
then.
a fucking stick.
When you're ready, right? When you're ready, but you're not ready today. You're not ready today.
When
All
somebody
right.
talks,
So, Ralph, I'm not
so,
really.
let me conclude my
Yeah,
point.
go.
So let me conclude
not
my
me,
point.
it's him. You're not listening to him at all.
When
So
you're
let me
done, Ralph.
conclude my point, right? So my point is that because they're innate genetic biological different stories, these stories have created people and cultures and traits, and we stand right now in our planet in the year of our Lord 2019 on English halo ground and look around us and we see that all chimps are not the same. This chimp is a lot like this chimp, you guys are a lot like that chimp, and I'm the Messiah, so there's no chimp like me.
All right.
So on that idea, all we are making as a positive ground stating is that biological determinism must be a factor, not the only factor or the explanatory factor in explaining differentiation between people, collections of people, and cultures.
Okay.
Do you accept that?
No, I don't at all.
Okay, you don't accept
Not
that.
at all.
So the only way to refute
So
it.
I'm actually
the only
going
way
to I'm actually going to be able to answer because right now
go
you
ahead.
just keep going around in circles, and we are explaining science in its smallest version. You're not actually explaining science in its full version. You're now conflating science with the idea that genetics is a capability as opposed to something that you can get and is then influenced by environments to produce certain phenotypes, etc. Right?
Yep.
You're not going into that because you don't want to go
Well,
into
I'm
that
taking
because
step
it
by
doesn't
step.
actually.
Step by step.
Give
So
me
let's
2
move
seconds.
up
Give me
the
2
step.
seconds. Give me 2
Yeah,
seconds.
take
Give me
your
2
time.
seconds.
Take your
Give me 2
time.
seconds.
Yeah.
So right now, you're demonstrating the fact that you don't really know what you're talking about in terms of genetics, in terms of phenotypes, in terms of human capability to mirror each other. And again, just how certain stimuli needs to be there for certain genetics to thrive, for certain genetics to pop up. And
To
this is why
evolve
we
is
call
the strict term.
this is why we call capabilities. And again, you already know about certain studies, but this is able to then, even if you have sleeping genetics, this is then being able to be woke up if you have the stimuli present to make sure.
No one's arguing about that.
Say that again?
I'm not disputing that.
Are you not?
No.
Good. That's good. That's good. We're making
There's
progress.
zombie genes.
That's good.
No,
That's
yeah.
good. We're making progress.
Yeah, you are.
So right now, I'm gonna move it on, right? Because you're gonna keep going on about this whole kind of
He's
explanation.
not actually talking, by the way.
I don't even know why you're here. I genuinely don't even know why you're here. I really
Same
don't.
reason
But
you are.
anyway, carrying on with the
Same reason you
topic.
are.
Carrying on with the topic. Like I said, right?
Because I'm English and
When
I'm
we
in
say
England.
the differences,
That's why.
you haven't given me a difference at all yet.
Why you
You haven't
why
actually
even
given
here?
me something that certain races can do that certain races can't.
Okay,
You haven't
so-
given me an example of that, and I'm waiting for the example of that. I gave you the example of the
Can I
horse that can't
ask
fly.
a question?
Okay,
I gave you the example
let
of
me give you
a
some
chimp that
examples
can't
of how to
swim.
think
So
about
give
that.
me
Okay.
something that the races cannot do that the other person can.
So there's two layers of the sandwich to answer your question between those two things. So now that I've established my positional view on what genetics is grounded in science,
Incorrect,
So what
sir.
happens to a gene? It moves up to a trait. How does a gene move to a trait? What does that even mean? Your genes code for proteins, and those are going to show up in your shape of your body, your static structure, and then they're going to show up by endocrinology into your hormonal system. Let me
Everyone
give you a
knows.
simple example. So if I took, what should I take? Should I take a
Marilyn
hormone?
Monroe?
No, let me take a high order social trait. Do you know what percentage of divorce is genetic?
No, do tell me.
32%. So if you take a high order social phenomena like divorce, 32% of it has a genetic correlation. 68% of it is environmental. So of course it's not nature versus nurture, it's both. So if there's a genetic explanation for divorce, 1/3 of the explanations must have a genetic variation. So from my genes comes my morphology, in out of my morphology comes my behavior, right? And I look at that behavior and those behaviors, one chimp behaving, multiple chimps creating social structures, and those create cultures and countries and nations. Divorce is a social phenomena that must be genetic because I have a genetic correspondence to 32% of divorce. I'm not talking about race now, just to make it easy. I can do it about gender or anything else. 32% of that is genetic. Do you accept that there's a genetic descriptor as a component for
I do
divorce?
not.
In which
I
case
do
you're
not.
a
Why not,
social
though?
And
scientist.
here's the
hefty.
problem.
Can you
Here's the
tell us why
problem.
not, though?
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. I'll tell you.
tell us
I'll tell you
why?
what's the problem. Now he's talking about genetics, right? And how much of a genetic is
Just
assigned to
science.
certain things, right? And he calls it science. 32, just 32.
32%.
Full drop 32, right?
32%.
Absolutely, perfect. So we'll take that, right, as the foundation for Ralph's knowledge on supposedly how much genetics contribute to certain factors in life.
32%.
And the problem is, with Ralph's study, is that we know that these genetics and how much they contribute is actually a fluctuating number. It's not set at 32. It's not set at 2. It's not set at 11. Certain factors can actually influence just how much those genetics actually contribute to certain
The answer is
situations.
32.
And the problem is not 32. I'll give you an example. Studies were done to find out how much intelligence actually contributes to certain human characteristics. They found that in the middle class, it accounted for 50%. Now, since we're all human, it should be either close or it should be exactly the same if we're trying to be scientifically honest.
No, it wouldn't. It would be the
So let's
opposite.
go.
If you're a scientist, you would never make that statement.
Don, tell me.
No.
Tell me why.
So if you look at any trait, I chose divorce just to get us off race. I could choose violence, for example, which because we had a good live
But
stream
you
with
just
Leon.
said
Let me a second.
you just said
I'll
contribution
let
is
you
a
go.
fixed number. But
I'll
sure,
let-
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll let you go. So what we do is when we do scientific studies for genetics, there's only one mechanism we have. That mechanism is called twin studies. Twin studies are the only way we look at genetic data, and
No, it's
on
not.
twin studies.
No, it's not. It's not the only way that we
Okay,
look
again, I
at
won't
genetics.
interject either. So
Fair enough, but
if
it's
you look
not.
at that, we have longitudinal history of about 50 years worth of twin studies. And from those twin studies, we can say, how does crime emerge? How does divorce emerge? How does all these social phenomena emerge? And what are the correlates down to that? So let's look at crime. So let's take crime. Crime's a matter, crime's issue, right? Black crime is a problem. What is the single determinant for crime?
Give me 2 seconds. It's not really a problem, but let me
really a problem.
Let me explain it to them.
Okay,
Let me explain it to
so
them.
what is the single cause for crime? It's aggression. Aggression is the only causal factor of crime. The largest study of black crime in the US, largest
Yeah, he's
meta-analysis.
simplifying it so hard.
No, it's
Do you think
poverty.
this is a
No, it's
DNA
poverty.
thing? Do you think it's a DNA thing, or do you
Thank
think
you.
it's
Even Ryden came up with a
Oh,
better
I'm
answer.
being sarcastic.
that
I'm being sarcastic.
Well,
So
you
let
should
me
be-
imagine
you should be a little bit more sympathetic of
100%
how.
genetic,
I'm not
0% genetic. Everything is a slider with the value.
So
Divorce
can I-
is 32%.
Guys, can I quickly,
I
guys,
used to live in a small town called.
Guys, please.
Yeah, sorry.
Could you mind if I quickly just address this, please? Just because, again, this is right-wing scientific babble, nonsense, absolute, just
right-wing
completely
babble.
against the
Not
science.
to be rude,
so
it's very
let me
selective.
continue. Let me continue, please.
No, it's not selective.
Tiger, if you want him after, I just want to finish this. Like, I really have no. This is not 2016. Like, I should be done with this, right?
2009.
Now, when we're talking about supposed
you need to catch up.
aggression and supposedly aggression adds to crime, etc.
No, it's the only causal
We can
factor
go
of crime.
through history and we can see that certain things weren't even crimes certain ages ago or certain centuries ago, right? Now, the problem with that is that crime then becomes very subjective. Doesn't really matter to Ralph. But let's no, give me 2 seconds.
I do have to interrupt because I have to quote you because I've saw you at this park and being genuine and go. I wake up and I see unfortunate murder, life stabbings, and I pray that it's not.
Yeah.
And it always is.
Black people misrepresent the crime by 160%.
And you said yourself from your mouth, you said, I hope that it's not. Why should you even have to think that? I hope that it's not a black person killing another black person.
Because the
Because it always
media,
is.
because the media
why
disproportionately
black people killing
reports.
other
Do you want to
black
wait? Do you want me to answer? You don't want me to answer?
Because that's from
Because
your
the
mouth.
media disproportionately reports when it's a minority stabbing over when it's a white stabbing.
bollocks.
That is the problem.
People get-
That is the problem.
Mate, you
So-
lost it.
It's like social science.
Apparently. Anyway, let me finish, please. Let me finish.
The media will
Right?
always report
So
40
his
year old
idea
stabbed.
is that aggression supposedly blah blah. Back to my original point, which was the not the constitution, how much genetics actually contribute. So the problem is when you have middle class people, 50% to 55% of their genetics or their IQ is contributed to genetics. It gets lower as you go to the working class. Why is that? It's because in middle class you tend to get people who are in more abstract thinking jobs, more processing jobs. Whereas when you get to the lower class or the working class, you get people who deal with more manual labor. So that means the stimuli for mental processing is not there. This is proved by Flint study as well. Flint study shows that the average modernization of the world and how we are going in this nice little projection like this, right? Means that everyone's IQ has raised 3 points every decade. Meaning that IQ is not set. Environmental factors can change IQ. And this man is completely wrong. So when we talk about, give me 2 seconds. When we talk about, yeah, no rush at all. So when we're talking about how much genetics constitutes to IQ, aggression, etc., what Ralph fails to take into consideration is the environmental factors, and quite purposely the environmental factors that highly influence the certain factors and the certain genetics and the certain outcomes of certain races, certain people, etc. So when I ask him, what is real about your racism, right? I'm being very honest because he calls himself a race realist. I call him a factual denialist.
You're racist.
Because once again, he said, what did he say? It's on recording that the number 32 for divorce is set. It cannot be changed.
I didn't say that.
Yet, why is it that we find? Why did we find?
The
It's on
video
camera.
record will show
It's
I
on
did not
camera.
say
It's on
that.
camera.
Right.
Why is it then that the working class have a lower contribution to IQ via genetics than the middle class of the same race?
Okay, so let me address these points. Let me address these points one at a time. The first point, and it's very, very crystal clear, and this is the danger of the neoliberals who are not educated in science.
Oh, it's the liberals.
Okay, so I didn't really
Bore me, man.
But
Spare
you've
me.
got such a potential. You've got such a potential.
Let me break this down. So, not once have I said or have I ever said that environment doesn't matter. All I'm
I
saying
never
is...
said that you did, but
Yeah,
sure.
so genetic studies show that everything is a balance between genes and your environment. But environmental issues, because of science, don't propagate. Only your genes propagate. So if you have children, you only pass X% of your genes to them and X% of the environment. Their genes will evolve in a new environment. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of the core of genetic evolution that you have. Moving forward, if I say divorce is 32%, this is X%, that's Y%, we say to understand the social phenomena, you must trace which parts are genetic, which parts are not. Let's take black crime, for example, because that was on one of a great stream with Leon and others. So, we look at the causal factors of black crime. We look at the largest longitudinal study of black crime in the United States. We look at the data all the way from the 60s. Maybe a second, you can jump in. And what do we find? The top 11 statistical models using social explanations that were family crime, poverty, interrate, lead poisoning, Baltimore, none of them have predictive power. None of them predictive power over that explanation. What is the single correlate? It's aggression. How do I know that? White guys with aggression cause white crime in white societies. Women don't commit crime. Why? We look at the difference of the single correlate in science as opposed to social science is your cortisol levels and your epinephrine levels determine what your difference is for aggression. So if I take my cortisol levels, women have a considerably lower cortisol level than men, and epinephrine levels, and we see the difference between white and black in cortisol and epinephrine. We go further down and we say, right, so the difference in cortisol and epinephrine, what is that caused by? There are 11 genes and androgen receptors that black people don't have the same coding systems as white people. We are making no political statements, we're making no moral statements, we're making no sociological statements. We're just claiming that this phenomena has a tractable, bidirectional difference from genes up and down. I could make this easy and get race out, and I could do it between white people. Here's my example.
I doubt you could. You're not even doing a great job of explaining it.
If we took a white population and we said, just let's say England was all white, and we find some fuckers are really more aggressive than others. We took the same argument, we found that they all lived in Herefordshire, and we say they're fucking Herefordshire gangies. That is the exact genetic argument up and down that proves that there's realism, that is biological realism. It applies to race, it applies to gender, and is scientifically traceable up and down. And to deny its existence is to deny a solution to the crime, and it's bad for the crime and the perpetrator.
I think this belief system that
white supremacist
factors in crime and race is more to do with genetics than actual.
No, it's a balance of two.
I think it's more culture. If you take a look at the 1953,
you don't have to guess. You do genetic studies.
Sorry.
From race, though.
I think if you take a look at 1953 in the United States, white Americans were saying that black people were more financially competent than white Americans, right? White people were saying this. This is before the welfare state. Without a doubt, it's linked to the welfare state. Thomas Sowell explained it was
I love Thomas Sowell.
But if you take a look at, I lived in a small town called Ashford, 98% white. I'm not a racist. Ashford, very poor. It's the Detroit of Kent. It's completely destroyed, right? It has half the population.
But you're making my case for me. For me.
Yeah, insane high cases of...
You make my case. If I went to the Slavic countries, they're almost all exclusively white.
It's not Slavic, it's pure English.
But let's say I went to a pure Slavic country, it's almost all entirely white, and I looked at the genetic description of the hormones and the strength, I would see genetic variation within a subpopulation.
That's because of lack of development in Slavic countries like Albania, like Romania, like Bulgaria.
Don't make that mistake, it's always a slider.
It's always a slider, right? Because I've already packed the first argument, I've already packed his whole kind of like thing. And again, he said the whole thing about aggression and so that they're supposedly fixed by gender, race, etc. Even that's completely wrong. You just said that why do women? Studies that are contradicted all the time by other studies. So you should read the literature, and possibly you'll be up to date. So the problem is with that.
So
you said that. Wait, give me 2 seconds.
Right
give me 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds. Let me finish. So you talking about women women? Why do women not commit more crimes than men? I would say that women use men to commit more crimes for them. This is why. So I will bring it to you that you supposedly would also say that testosterone is the reason, in particular, as to why men are things. So a study was done recently to find out whether or not testosterone is the gene to do, or the hormone to do with aggression. They found that estrogen was more aggressive than testosterone. Do you know how they found that out? They found out whether or not men and women could work in a team. Not men and women. Men in a whole could work in a team and women could work in a team. They found that the women could not work in a team in comparison to the men, and they showed more aggressive traits than the men. So this is an example of how caught up you are with the academic literature. So please, stop boring us with scientific explanation and actually address your arguments.
So could you name five
give me 2 seconds, give me 2
geneticists
seconds,
today and their studies?
Give me 2
without
seconds,
using
give me
your
2
phone?
seconds, give me 2 seconds. Let me
Can
finish.
I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go on.
Can you wait? Can you wait? Can you let me finish first? Can you let me finish first, yeah? So, we've just heard supposedly that women are more aggressive, men are more aggressive, etc. I can bring you up studies as well to do with domestic violence to show that women are actually a lot more aggressive, right? But the problem is, we can't say that objectively. Because if we look a good couple centuries ago, it was without a doubt men are more violent than women, right? The amount of wars that were going on, definitely. So the idea that certain things are fixed and certain things are set, complete fallacy. And you haven't proved that once today. Completely undermines your whole idea of race realism. Because if nothing is said, give me 2 seconds. Because if nothing is said, that means that certain things can be changed, which means that certain people can change their circumstance and their condition with the right stimuli and the right lookout and the right welfare. Now, I will ask you again, where are these examples of differences between the races, between the people, etc., that cannot be changed, thus meaning that certain people can't actually get along functionally within a society?
Okay, so let me answer your question. Let me answer your question this way. I'm a theoretical computer scientist. Your question is a violation of what we call the 18 rules of logic. You're violating modus ponens. Everyone will look it up. You're violating the following conditions of logic. You're saying just because X and Y is true right now, you're saying, can I not change X equal to be Y in the future?
No.
Let's not
apply.
I didn't interrupt you.
No, because you're adding your own narrative. Then don't add your own narrative. Don't add your own narrative.
Your narrative.
Say what I've actually said. Go on, Ralph. I'll let you finish.
So if we look at his words, and later I will draw a diagrammatic, logical decomposition of his sentence for you, using logic, in the comment section. What he is making is a fallacy in logic called modus tollens, right? He is saying that because X and Y is currently this, it cannot be X and Y in the future. That's an argumentation error. Park that. Once again, you have not done a single thing right now to demonstrate why physics at the bottom creates biology, which creates, it creates chemistry, which creates biochemistry, which creates genes at the source of life. Genes express themselves in a replicating evolution.
So you want me to explain evolution?
I do not interrupt you.
You want me to explain evolution?
You really couldn't do that. You're not qualified. So from evolutionary biology, you get to the conditions of social society, and the neo-realism far right, like ourselves, are saying that bidirectional stack in science must have descriptive powers in both directions. Genetics is critical to that. It explains gender, race, and all sorts of things.
It's not critical.
Not openly, but in a slider. And to date, I haven't heard a single thing that even slightly threatens what you're saying. And I suspect that because you don't have a scientific background.
Then you haven't been listening. You haven't been listening at all.
Which is okay.
You just said, like you said,
so at that
genetics,
point, I think we've probably given this guy enough content.
Genetics are critical.
Content of everything.
There we go. He's going on walkabout.
No, I want to keep going. All right.
No, Ralph. If you've had enough, I can go for days. We've only conquered the scientific part of it, right?
Yeah.
I still have the historical part to go over. I still have the
Leon,
current day to go over.
I will post the studies and I will retract everything and put the links in.
And then when we talk about the genetic parts of it, when I made the point of saying like, hey, look, Indians and Nigerians are doing very well in Western countries, a lot of people say, oh, that's because they take the cream of the crop. Well, black Americans in the 50s were not the cream of the crop. They were slave descendant West Africans.
Give me 2 seconds. Let me address this cream of the crop argument. Every country sends their cream of the crop to certain countries to learn education, whatever, etc. That does not explain, right? When people say Nigerians, when we bring up the Nigerian fact that they are the most educated in America and they say they send over the cream of the crop, the Europeans send their cream of the crop. The Chinese send their cream of the crop. But they still don't achieve as much as the Nigerians. So the idea that we are sending people who are more better or supposedly more kind of like privileged to attain these positions and these other countries aren't. It's already an idea that people have that Africans can't achieve unless they are of X, Y, and Z.
They are achieving right now.
Of course they are. Of course they are.
And then when we take a look at Ireland, I mean, you take a look at 1847. It was a very undeveloped, very poor, very dangerous place.
This is it.
Irish people today have better living standards than English people. Explain that to me. If race realism is so real.
We'll ask Ralph. We're going to wait. We're going to unpack him all day. I'm here all day.
Up and down the stack, and we look at everything as a slider between genes and
so wait, Ralph.
Look
Can you please explain, when we take a look at Ireland in 1848, very underdeveloped,
I actually have the
very
IQ
dangerous
for this
places.
as well.
Yeah, very dangerous. I mean, Irish people were seen as being idiots. They were kind of seen as how the Slavs were seen in Germany. When you look at Ireland today, highest education rate, highest living standards than even Britain.
Can I quickly comment on that as well, just in addition to that? During that time as well, where it was not a time of prosperity in Ireland, their average IQ as well was rated subhuman. It was rated around 80. As Ireland modified, Ireland specified itself, right? The IQ of Ireland raised, and it's now on par with Scotland and England. So again, when we're talking about IQ and we're talking about the setting of IQ, it's not set. It's not set.
Can you explain Ireland to me? Because obviously,
Okay, but there's many conversations, so I don't mind one-on-one. Let's go back.
Alright, so I mean, when you take a look at Ireland, they were constantly known as the blacks of Europe. They were sort of
the Irish
as
oppression
subhuman.
narrative is a left-wing concept. Yeah.
They were seen as the blacks of
Well-documented
Europe.
left-wing
It was very underdeveloped, very dangerous place, a lot of wars, a lot of killings, right? There were several jokes are made about the Irish. When you look at Ireland today, it's
Irish
fast
suffering is a liberal
economic,
country.
faster
It's
economic
failing
progression
now,
in
but
even
yes.
England.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I mean, how
But
can
they
we,
took
how
all
can we
the
do
EU money,
things
yeah.
about... Wait, what?
They took all the EU money, right? So.
What, more than England?
My
Because they're doing better than
my
England. So,
friend
I mean, if you're saying
my
they're
friend
taking
runs
the EU
Microsoft
money...
Ireland. They took all the EU money from the EU, but carry on.
And then...
My
And then when we-
friend-
and then when we
so
take a
your
look
friend
at-
knows because he runs Microsoft Ireland.
There we go.
Wait, Ralph.
Microsoft Ireland took all
No,
of
they
it.
took all the EU money as well.
Ralph, who did?
More than the Greeks.
Republic of Ireland.
But because
Ralph.
your friend is...
No, I'm just saying the Republic of Ireland, the boom you see that started was predominantly EU money.
Ralph, and then when we take a look at differences in IQ and intelligence between your average Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, the richest man in Ireland today is from Pakistan. He's he's an Irish Pakistani.
Well, the
So you know
president of
what I mean?
Ireland, the Taoiseach of Ireland is not.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I mean, you know, so how can you tell me that there's genetic differences that stops economic prosperity when
But I didn't say that.
history and the numbers contradict?
IQ is about curve.
Yeah.
I could have the smartest Nigerian, the
you know
smartest
that's been
person from Burkina Faso, right?
I know this already. I know this already.
Where's the curve in
I know
Ireland?
this already.
Because, I mean, shouldn't
But
they
the worst
be
thing is that
doing
with the
crap
bell
if-
curve
if-
as well.
Okay, let me
Can I
try
quickly,
And then when you take a look,
can I quickly
Yeah,
just
yeah.
add in?
questions,
Just add in
no
as
time to
well. No, I just want to add in.
Yes, Patrick, I'm
When
patient.
it comes to the bell curve and it comes to the people who do believe in the bell curve, etc., who haven't actually read the book and have read the citations and read the actual criticism
Difference
towards the
between
bell
non-scientists
curve,
and scientists.
The problem
Are you a
is
scientist?
that
I am indeed,
the
yeah.
bell
What do you
curve
do
was
as a scientist?
I
misrepresented.
run
It was cherry picked.
But that's-
Most of the
what's that got to do
citations
with
and most of the
biology?
quotations in it were taken from studies that had nothing to do with the actual
but what's that
context,
got
and
to
they
do
didn't
with
understand the
biology?
context of the study.
Yeah.
But they
have
cherry
you
picked
studied
these, and they
biology?
cherry picked. Sorry,
So
they
what
cherry
are you
picked a
talking
lot of
bullshit
this
already? You
basically
can't just say I'm a scientist
to kind of
and
fit
then you
their
have
narrative.
authority
And a lot
over
of these
any
people have been
science.
stripped of their scientific rights, the scientific Nobel Peace Prize or whatever.
you are. You're
Their-
saying
their
I'm
their
a
achievements
scientist.
were stripped
Aristotle's
of them
not, but
because
you have
a lot
nothing
of
to
this
do-
information
he's
was
not.
used to
But you're not a biologist.
demonize Jewish people.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
yeah.
there was so much of it that was used
And
to
then when we
demonize
talk
other
about the
races.
Jews, I mean, they are one of the smartest people in the world, and yet they're...
How many Nobel Peace Prize winners? Do you know what I mean? So this idea about race realism in particular, and I'm not surprised that it comes from people like Ralph as well. There's always going to be people in particular who they call them house. I don't like to call people house slaves at all. But there's always going to be people who think that as long as I'm not lost,
No, I think it's better to have these kind of conversations with people of colour, because there are
Absolutely.
people of colour who
Absolutely.
believe in this.
Absolutely.
And other people, other Nigerians I've met who are very prosperous, and I told them, oh no, actually, West Africans, and then when I spoke to them about people use the cream of the crop argument. Well, it doesn't make sense when you take a look at the Irish or the slave descendant West Africans from the United States in the
Okay, I
1950s,
understand
before
science,
the
I
welfare
just don't
state.
know
But
computer
Thomas Sowell
science
tried to
and
warn us about.
The only thing I would say about that, with
Thanks
Thomas
for
Sowell in
letting me know.
particular, and we're talking about 1950s America,
But,
a lot of
like,
people
if-
don't
if-
take
if-
into realization
I
that
can
when we're
cite
talking
you
about
plenty
Black
of
Americans back then,
scientists
right?
about
The
that.
reason Black Americans then suffered after, I think it was the 1960s, affirmative action, etc., is because they were being paid less. So they were able to get jobs because they were being paid less. Right? That's the biggest difference. And then as soon as affirmative action came in, it meant that they, no affirmative action, equal pay, the equal pay thing came in, right? As soon as that came in, it meant that people were then more enticed to employ white people because they didn't want to pay black people the same as
Interesting
white
thing about
people.
back
So
then-
the problem is, when you're struggling already to get jobs, right, your family structure is going to fall anyway, right? We can talk about feminism, talk about that, yes, and that definitely had an influence. But the problem is, we need to look at the economics. And when we're talking about the economics, that's the one myth that I think Thomas Sowell has missed out. The fact that black people were being paid less. Now, if we're saying that black people were more stable, etc., and we should return back to the 1950s, we're basically saying that we should return to a time where black people were paid less than white people in order to make a living. That is the problem.
Can I say something about
Yeah,
that?
go, man.
So,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I kind of lost what I was going to say.
Take it off.
Oh, okay. So Thomas Sowell being paid less. Woodrow Wilson, Democratic president, quite racist. The minimum wage was introduced because they didn't have a minimum wage. You paid what you get. You know, you're far more likely to pay a black guy less money for doing better work than you were a white guy. That's why they introduced the minimum wage. It was undercutting the white, low-skilled, low-paid white Americans.
Absolutely.
That was what was introduced.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm not saying we should go back to that. I think we've progressed to be like, no, black people are just like us, and I think that it I think elements of that should be introduced to the fact that you get paid as much as you're worth.
The worst thing is that even promoting that message, for me personally, I think it's a very dangerous mentality, because when we see historically that there's been deprivation, there's been a lack of resources, lack of jobs, etc., that is when we tend to see the most nationalism, the most right-wing rhetoric, the most kind of racist kind of seeking out. So the problem is, if we start doing that and we start saying that you can pay minorities less, there are minorities willing to work out there for pittance. But we know that the native British people, white people, the Americans, they are not willing to work less than that, right? They're always looking for a better pay, which they should, especially with these rent prices now, right? But if that starts to happen, that already then begins to, exacerbate tensions between the races. Because most people come here and they want to live, but they're sending money back home. And because of the conversion rate, no matter what they're earning, well, not no matter, but, you know, depending on what they earn or whatever, it goes back as quite a bit of heft, quite a bit of money, quite a bit of capital, right? And they can build a house back home and retire fairly nicely. But the problem is, that brings down living standards for people here. And the problem with that is that you then start to get all of this race-rallying tensions. And this is what happened with the Chinese. They don't like to bring this up, but this is what happened to the Chinese in America. When there was a big boom on gold, the Chinese didn't have much of a problem. As soon as the gold well started to run out, that's when we started to see Chinese people being told to go back to their country. So that's the problem with narratives such as that.
Can I say something?
Go.
I don't think you should use words like Uncle Tom. Because it is.
I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not accusing you of being one of those guys.
Yeah, go.
No, I mean, we should be having these kinds of conversations with mainly people of colour. Having these kind of conversations with white people is incredibly difficult. It's just awkward. Sorry, white. So I'm not a bigot or anything.
See, the problem, not with you in particular, but I think when we're having this conversation, we need to watch our words. You know, even when someone says, like, I remember a gentleman who said to me, like, you know, a person of color or whatever, right? Or a colored person. Now I looked at him and he was like in his mid-80s, whatever. So he was coming from a time where that kind of use of the word was just a pass and go, right? But the problem, it's really cold. But the problem is, I find that nowadays people are a lot more sensitive. People are being called snowflake left, right, and center. I find that right-wing white
coming from the people who throw a tantrum for a vegan sausage roll.
Seriously, tend to be some of the most snowflakey activists that you will find out there. You mentioned the word white, they lose it. So I'm trying my hardest now.
Do you remember that film, Dear White People, that came out? Did you see the film?
I saw the film.
The TV series on Netflix is a bit crap. The film was way better.
Do you know what? I liked it, but it was a bit preachy.
They watched the trailer and they went crazy.
Absolutely.
It was just all it was talking about a black experience in college. It was not anti-white at all. If anything, it was pro-white.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
The thing is, if you watch the film as well, it gets a bit more of a nuanced message in terms of you have aggressive black nationalists or activists. You have aggressive white activist nationalists, and it was really nuanced. But I just didn't like the feel of being preachy that it sent across.
I think it was inaccurate because I felt like they didn't acknowledge the fact that there are white people who are very much into this sort of thing, and they did miss that out. They had that one white guy, and he was like,
This is a problem. This is why I don't like using the blanket term white people.
There
are more than enough white people, and I would say the majority progressive Europeans that are trying their hardest to conquer certain narratives like Ralph. And that is one of the biggest problems that we have now, is that oftentimes we have activists on black sides, Asian sides, etc., who throw out these blanket terms, and they're being just as divisive as the white.
Because I always get annoyed whenever I defend Islam, the historical parts, and people go, "Oh, you're a leftist," and then I'd be like,
"There's nothing to do with being leftist."
Oh no, systemic racism. I don't think it's a real problem. And he goes, "Oh, what? So you're, you know what I mean? You're a far right."
But this is the problem with people like Ralph himself, etc. These are buzzwords: leftist, communist, Marxist, whatever. The left needs to grow beyond that. And you saw the video of Owen Jones this week taking on James Goodard as they were kind of like heckling Anna Salisbury, right? He just laughed it off because the point is that Owen Jones knows that what he's doing is fundamental for the future. He knows that what he's doing is actually going to make a difference.
What do you feel about the EU?
Oh, another conversation. But in particular, like I said, I just want to bring it back to the conversation about IQ, race, and race realism, right? The truth is, people need to read the facts. They need to read the studies.
People are unbelievably.
They need to.
Sargon of Akkad had a conversation with Jared Taylor, and Jared Taylor was, oh well, if you look at the riots in London in 2011, it was about a black guy who got shot, and it was a bunch of black people rioting. And then even Sargon of Akkad, and I respect him for this, came out and goes, no, it wasn't just black people. There were white people in it.
Absolutely.
Like, and you see how ignorant he was. He didn't even know about it. He goes, there are an underclass group of white people who we call chavs, and they were very much involved. In Ashford, Kent, there was a riot. They tried to kick off at the outlet centre. They were all white. But I'm not a big.
No, it's cool. But this is one of the biggest things. This is one of the big things I hate, that everyone seems to, and especially it tends to be from really weak intellectually.
Can I say that I just tried to. Thing is, I'm very self-critical, and I just tried to be honest about. All right, this is a problem. I think we need to acknowledge this. It's like we need to fix this.
But the problem is, you can be like that, but then it's never enough. It's never enough until you can generalize your whole race as the problem. It's not enough to say that we have a problem, we can fix it. Blah, blah, blah. It's a problem. It's only acceptable when you say, you know what, we are the problem, we'll leave.
You take a look at John Smith, for example. I don't know if this is rude. John Smith, for example, single parent household, very prosperous, very well educated man. In my opinion, I think he's a pretty cool guy. He's a little bit ignorant because he parrots a lot of right wing things. Like, when talking about socialism, he tends to go, everywhere socialism has ever gone, it's always gone bad. I mean, and they like to talk about Russia, China. They never.
Which ask the simple question: what socialist, what communist practices did they apply? They will never be able to answer.
They never talk.
Never.
They never talk about Yugoslavia. There were no bread lines in Yugoslavia. It was pretty moderate. It wasn't until money went bad, and then the ethnic groups started eating each other, and that was when it all went wrong.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of like a diet socialist, so I believe in protecting the work. I believe in protecting workers' rights. I'm not all about handouts. I think that's dangerous.
Again, even with socialism, Marxism, capitalism, communism, etc. Again, a lot of people seem to think that it's binary, and the biggest problem with that is that it's unfortunate. It's on a spectrum, right? And if I've ordered the Red Book, so I'm going to read it myself. I've ordered the Communist Manifesto, I'm going to read it myself. But from what I understand it is that it's on a spectrum. Marx originally thought of it as an evolution from capitalism, working its way up to a state of time where we didn't feel like we needed to exploit each other in order to get resources, in order to get capitals, and in order for us to separate us individually as classes, that we could all work for the greater good of each other.
You only need to look at the working conditions of the Soviet people, the working conditions of a great deal of South American countries, and a lot of people try to go, oh, it used to be good until socialism came along. Like, you're trying to tell me that the banana republics in South America were good for those people? Are you mad?
Absolutely. So genuinely, like when we're talking, like I said, when we're talking about again the race realism argument, etc. There's a selective point. Even all of this right-wing rhetoric, when we're talking about communism, etc. There's a selective point where they stop their education. They don't like to see history in its entirety. And I was going to bring
even Ben Shapiro does it. And I'm thinking,
absolutely.
Bro, really?
Absolutely. I was going to bring Ralph into the historical facts that despite Europeans supposedly having a higher on average IQ, it took them thousands of years to come into the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age. While other countries were thriving already.
You just look at Western Europe when the Romans left. You know what I mean? The reason it was the Dark Ages because they didn't even have a written language.
This is it.
Now I'm not saying they're stupid. I'm just saying you want to talk race realism.
Let's
talk race realism. The Nubians had a written language before the English.
Yeah, exactly. The Dugons were already plotting stars, and these people couldn't even write. So the problem is when we talk about race realism, you'd have to be an historical fraud in order to think that race realism has even a grain of salt.
I'm not calling you racist.
There's nothing.
And they say, oh, I'm not a racist because the Japanese have a higher IQ than we do. Well, if they did, why didn't they have the Industrial Revolution? Why didn't they conquer the world? And that explains it. You know what I mean?
But this is the thing. This is why I asked Ralph. I asked him.
They always want to say it's majority one
at the top instead of being like a.
But this is the problem.
You know when I just showed you.
I always knew I was going to have this debate one day, and I was ready.
Oh, so
I showed you earlier that guy who was falsifying the
data,
the
yeah.
data to make black people look inferior.
But
And
this is
they'll ignore.
But this is the problem. Even when we talk about the IQ test, right? People love to bring in the IQ test, say that, you know, I have this IQ, so I'm better than you, whatever, blah, blah. When we bring back the IQ test to its original form, the actual person who's credited with bell curve, etc., didn't even find the IQ test that was originally stated as something that was adequate to assess everyone's overall intellect. So he made a new test. Even that test has been critiqued continuously to not take into consideration non-abstract tasks, physical tasks, hand-eye coordination, all of these things that you would need in a society that doesn't have desktop offices, right, in order for you to survive. But when you look at how it's been tailored and how it's been artificially made to suit European standards and not anywhere else, it becomes very clear who this test was made for.
Cool.
And a lot of the times I see Ralph trying to say that supposedly socio-economic, culture, and all of these things have been taken into account, and they found no difference. I found no studies to prove.
Do you know what African country has the highest IQ?
Nigeria. Oh no.
Sierra Leone. Yeah, that's 1 point difference from East Asian Malaysians.
Cultural basis.
I was gonna use this against Tan. You know what I mean? So when people do this whole race and IQ, and that's the thing, is like even if a country has higher IQ like Mongolia, that doesn't mean that they're living prosperous lives and they're you know what I mean? So it's nonsense.
The thing is, we need to get into the real grips as why realism actually exists and why we have people
I'll tell you why. I mean, I don't know about Ralph, but I know why it is. It's because of.
Did you say?
I think it's just insecure people.
There you
very
go.
insecure people.
There you go.
A lot of these like
There you go.
right-wing white guys.
Because they believe like, if they.
You never find
No, a
Brad
lot of
Pitt
these
saying that he's a race realist.
A lot of these right-wing white guys.
You know, seriously.
A lot of these are alt-right white guys I see. I just feel like they're insecure guys.
Of
Very
course.
insecure
I just feel like
people.
they're
Very insecure people.
How many of them how often
That's why
do you ever
they're
see?
That's why the alt-right rule the internet, because they don't have
Absolutely,
lives.
absolutely.
If you look at Prager University, when they realised that the alt-right were used to get Trump into power, oh yeah, Prager were totally cool with nationalism and all that shit, right? When they realised that they were anti-Semitic and they were dumb, that was when they did what is the alt-right, and they said, oh, they're more like the left, they're identitarian, and they believe in special treatment for Native American, European Americans. Yeah, right? As soon as it happened, you look at the dislike factor on what is the alt-right on the Prager University thing, and the hate comments, like, oh, do this, do that. And
But
it's
this
like,
Insecure losers who just stand on the internet all the time.
Of course.
Like, I can understand having certain right-wing values, right? But
the thing is,
it seems it's like that's their identity.
But this is why I wanted to
wins.
get. This
You
is
don't
why I
get
wanted to get into
special
this
treatment for being
conversation, because there's a dangerous factor here, and people don't really go into the further kind of implications of these arguments. Because even when I was speaking to say Max, Red Cap Boy, etc., right? If you go if you go further into these people's ideologies, it's very interesting and very worrying. The kind of ideas that they have, especially about women, especially about other races, and especially about the kind of like destination of humanity. Oftentimes I hear people saying that white people just want the freedom to define their own destiny, and I'm like, no one has ever prevented white people from defining their own destiny.
what freedoms do they not have?
This is the question. So
you know, these like right people, they'll be like constantly calling people, oh, stop being a victim. But then look, with that type of narrative.
No, that's the thing. The
victims as well.
white victim mentality, it exists, and it's this idea like, oh, we're being oppressed. I spoke to this one guy here saying
the biggest one, Red Pill over there, is the biggest white.
There is a white victim mentality, and they go like, oh, we're the oppressed ones. You guys get to talk about race, we don't. When do you not talk about race? You being serious?
You know, another one is, I remember Ralph talking, right? And then he kept saying, they got you. It's a left-wing narrative you're speaking. Or when people just speak about themselves being oppressed, they'll say you've got a victim mentality. I don't understand.
This is one of the biggest problems I have as well with people like Ralph in particular. They'll throw out these terms, the leftist, whatever, blah, blah. I am leftist. Every time I come to this park, no one is.
Man, I think you're pretty
neutral. I'll say I'm pretty neutral.
But you know what people view as left, like social justice.
No, but the thing is, like, verbally, I actually say that I am a leftist. Every time I come to this park and address people or actually challenge people people on their kind of like disagreements and their kind of like quarrel with the left. They're never able to justify their viewpoints. They're never able to actually back up anything they do with facts. So when I hear these sound bites, it really annoys me because the left has done a lot of work to secure a lot of people's rights. When gay people of color, they've done a lot of things and sacrificed a lot in order to make sure that other people have better standards or equal on par standards that they have in privileged positions.
When Tan came in babbling this racist bullshit, which people came out to go fuck yourself, you're an arsehole? I'll tell you who it was. It was that guy over there.
Yeah.
The far leftist. He was the one guy who went, nah,
Absolutely.
you can't. And telling other people, no, you can't just allow this guy to talk like that.
Absolutely. But again, this is the problem. With the left, you will have people who have no actual ties to the culture that's been on question. No actual kind of like investment, but they still see wrong. That's all they see. They see wrong and they call it out. And this is the problem with people like on the right wing. All they see is investment. That's all they see. They see self-investment and they see how can I better the situation for myself.
What's deluded?
This is one of my biggest problems with the right.
Is a lot of people, they'll take the videos from like the 1950s and the 1940s and be like, oh, the ethnic homogeneous, it was a peaceful place. You're trying to tell me Europe was a peaceful place in the 40s? What? It was.
But these are the same people who voted us to get out of the EU as well and think that the EU for some reason doesn't really have a thing.
I have mixed feelings. I have paranoia about like is this kind of thing with the EU and the kind of like protecting the rights.
One world order.
Well, no, is the whole kind of, because when he talks about he wants the capital to be in Brussels, I kind of believe that because Macron did say he wants a unified Europe and the fact that they are capping how much production that farms are allowed to, and I get where they're coming from. There's a part of me that is very paranoid about Steve Bannon, because it is a thing. It's just like, look, mate, if you're not, and I like Steve Bannon, I like what he preaches, and yeah, he's right. No racist thing. He hasn't been caught saying any racist or anti-Semitic stuff, and I genuinely looked at it because I watched a video of him and
yeah, you do your research.
Yeah. I watched it and I was like, because I heard, Steve Bannon, he's a racist, he's a neo-Nazi. And I watched a video of him in Oxford.
Some dodgy ties, but you're right.
Yeah, I watched a video of him in Oxford, and it's like, wow, this dude, he seems to know what he's talking about.
I don't think ties are enough.
No, and he goes like, I don't go to Fox News. I go to like the leftists. I go to the other people because I want to get the 25% of Bernie guys. But the thing that makes you paranoid about him is it's the kind of people he rolls with. He rolls with the identitarian right in Europe, and it's like, bro, really?
But I think
how
again,
are you going to get the Bernie guys there?
But I think again, you need to be very careful with what businessmen are actually capable of. With Steve Bannon, like you say, I think, was he not a Breitbart at some point as well?
Yeah, I think he was.
So he bounces around a lot. But just to bring it back on the EU in particular, when we're talking about the EU, now I understand you're kind of like, you say like this.
My beef with the EU is the censorship and the kind of the fact that they're trying to stop.
But this is the problem. You can have those concerns and still be a leftist. This idea that you have to be a leftist and take every kind of leftist propaganda.
Even my take with the black experience is it's a leftist black experience. I'm thinking, how can we help the situation? In my opinion, I do think there is a serious problem with the destruction of the black family. I'm trying to think about what's causing it, and I think if we can fix this, then the struggle is over.
Absolutely. But the thing is, when we think about the EU and we think about like the one world order, etc., right? The EU in particular, or the EU, was set up to stop Europeans from warring, right? And
the coal and steel company with Italy, France, and Germany.
Yeah, and in that incentive, it's done its job. So people can say that it's a failed project. It hasn't failed.
No, it hasn't failed. It did very well. In the beginning, it did very well, and there's a reason why
EU,
France, Germany, and England. Yeah,
2 wars. War every 2 years in Europe.
Yeah.
It has done its job. Yes, there's going to be corruption. Yes, but this is just human nature. There's always going to be people who mess up a system.
And the thing is with the censorship, all right, you can censor people like Jared Taylor and the Nazis. I feel like the censorship is getting a little bit too Chinese.
So I understand that, but I think we're not contributing right now. We're not helping the situation with people like Ralph, people like Tommy Robinson, people like Identity Europe. We're not really helping the situation by allowing freedom of speech to be idolized by these people.
They're so full of shit with freedom of speech. Like, look, I've criticised the actions of a great deal of Muslims in the past.
Absolutely.
Right? What I don't do is, when a white Muslim comes in, I don't do a thing saying a Muslim revert. Say it was an an Islamic terrorist attack.
Absolutely.
Yeah, don't say Muslim revert just because he's white. Or when who's that fucker? Gavin McGuinness came over and he says, "Oh, he in the Charlottesville terrorist attack. He was a domestic terrorist." No, he was a terrorist. That was you know, Red Ice TV. You know, they're coming up with conspiracy theories saying that woman had a heart attack before she got hit by the car. It's like, wow, you people are pieces of shit.
Absolutely.
To try and justify the terror.
But this is the problem. When we're talking about the EU, right, they have to have a backlash to a lot of this stuff that is going on. And I feel like right now the left is lacking behind, especially when it comes to places like YouTube, social media, all of the grassroots movements.
No. The left is having a revolution. You know, ContraPoints.
Currently, yeah.
You like ContraPoints?
No.
Check out ContraPoints. Sean and
Sean King.
No, his name's Sean. He's got a skull and this thing. He's a very, very clever man. And he debunked the whole rape in Sweden thing.
Yes.
He debunked that. He debunked Stefan Molyneux. He's completely full of shit.
But it's like, even with I was watching a video recently, just in general, again, race realism nonsense. A lot of the times when you have a lot of these things happening, you go to the comment sections and all you can see is, like, say with the Moroccans, the Moroccan thing that happened recently. Now, these girls went out and it shouldn't have happened. But the problem is the Moroccan authorities actually suggested to them that this place where you're hoping to go to is a known dangerous place. Moroccans don't even travel there.
This is the thing
but
that they
chose to do otherwise. So they went there and what happened happened. Now we have all of these Identity Europe groups. We have Stefan Molyneux, we have Lauren Southern now saying that, well, what did you expect? You went to a Muslim country, this is what happens. But the problem is, I have a big problem with that message because it's like people are saying rape culture doesn't exist here. So as soon as that happens, it's like, oh, please come back to Europe where you can get raped in Europe. At least you're getting raped by someone that looks like you. What kind of message is that?
And when they do get raped, it's always like, oh, well, you shouldn't have worn that dress. Or, well, you know,
but exactly. There's always long sight when it's
like
rape in Europe.
Like,
there's
that's
always.
the thing. And the far right, specifically Paul Joseph Watson, who's definitely far right, I know for a fact he is. He never spoke about that young girl who got raped in Ireland, and then her knickers were used as an excuse of saying, oh, like consent and shit.
Oh, yeah.
Completely silent. Just like he never talked about the Pittsburgh terrorist attack in the synagogue. That was some Dylan Roof shit.
I'm gonna cut, bro. I'm gonna cut because I'm cold. I'm cold. Race realism, get that shit out of the park. Get educated, learn your science, and you won't have to have a basic GCSE lesson on evolution. Like, respect.
Content over everything. From your man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
It's about the cause and effects of crime as it pertains to black people.
Criminology, fam. No, we do already. He's on his way still. Let's see what the volume is. Be alright, man. Testing 1 2 1 2. 1 3 1 3. Bad man up.